the Menagerie. Let's talk about some movies.
Strap on your still suits and get Duned, my little desert mice. If you thought Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1 was slow with a lot of exposition, well, Part 2 still has a ton of exposition, but with more stuff blowing up, which is always cool. I haven't finished reading the book, but I hope future sequels get as insanely weird as I hear the books do, because these two Dunes are pretty straightforward, and I don't want to say bland, but it's very medieval drama and space vibes. Epic, but uptight. Villeneuve is great at capturing that stoic grandeur, but sometimes it could use a little spice. See what I did there? Give me a little hint of David Lynch's influence, just a pinch of Lynch, or even Jodorowsky. The cast are all good being super serious, but the standout is Javier Bardem, as the only modicum of levity. Timothée Chalamet steps it up this time around, but still feels a little miscast with his Instagram face, and also, does the main character really need that many names? Paul, Moadib, Lisan Al-Gaib, Mahdi, Kwisat Sadrak. Minor gripes aside, it's undeniably beautiful to look at, especially some of the new sets and costumes. Villeneuve masterfully foreshadows impending doom with the Bene Gesserit shenanigans in Part 1 and successfully pays them off in Part 2. Dune is a great metaphor for our real-world imperialistic societies exploiting the resources of foreign countries, but they could stand to be just a little crazier, and have a little more Middle Eastern representation if there's going to be so much obvious cultural influence. Otherwise, I'm down to Dune, baby. I don't think a documentary has made this much of a splash since the one about Michael Jackson called Leaving Neverland, which turned out to possibly be a false narrative anyway. Who knows? However, what we do know is that several Nickelodeon children's shows in the 90s and early aughts were staffed by predators and written by perverts. These are just the ones with hard evidence, so unfortunately it could be as widespread as ever, for all we know. Big businesses are hard to kill, and both human trafficking and kids' television are big businesses. Drake Bell bravely came forward about his abuse by a producer that occurred just as the series Drake and Josh began production in the early 2000s. Luckily for him, it seems he had a good support system through therapy and his family, but for so many others, that's not the case. Amanda Bynes, Britney Spears, Orlando Brown, and Shaun Weiss, just to name a few that have fallen on hard times after years of childhood fame. Hopefully this spotlight brings better protection to the children in Hollywood that are abused physically, mentally, and emotionally every year behind closed doors. Thankfully, it seems like the people mentioned in the doc aren't working anymore, but like roaches, where there's one of these scumbags, there's a whole nest hiding in the walls. Trigger warning, obviously, so viewer discretion is advised. Alright, let's lighten it up a bit. John Cena has been kind of crushing the comedy game for quite a few years now, and Ricky Stanicky is just another great example of this giant goof not taking himself seriously. This movie felt like a throwback to older, dumb, raunchy comedies like Neighbors or Without a Paddle, where a group of guys that have been friends since childhood do some wacky shit, lie to their partners until it bites them in the ass, and finally attempt a basic, heartfelt ending. It's also great to see Andrew Santino and other stand-up comedians aside from Kevin Hart getting co-leading movie roles again, because we used to do that more often, and sure, maybe they're not always the best actors, but Tommy Boy, Friday, 40-Year-Old Virgin, classics. We used to just have comedians stand around saying funny shit. Everyone gets a chance to be hilarious here, but the standout is obviously Cena as Stanicky. I mean, he should really sing those songs in next year's Oscars. Overall, the jokes mostly land, the premise is silly, and it's free on Netflix, so crack open a cold one and take a fun break from our overly sensitive society. March turned out to be a good month for horror, and if you watch this next movie, you might not sleep for a month. Stopmotion, an indie horror film directed by Robert Morgan, is an awesome take on the live-action / stop-motion animation hybrid. Like its ancestor Jason and the Argonauts, I imagine seeing sword-fighting skeletons for the first time had a similarly unsettling effect back then, just as the meat puppets in this movie do now. Ray Harryhausen would be proud. The lead performance by Aisling Franciosi nails the gradual descent into madness, but this movie might also struggle from being a slow burn. The vomit-inducing design of the stop-motion dolls reminded me of the insane film Mad God by the legendary Phil Tippett, and while I wasn't a huge fan of the formless nature of that film, this one being more grounded in reality and live-action performances feels a little more satisfying. Stop-motion examines the idea of obsession and takes the idea of getting out of your successful parent's shadow to the disgusting extreme. I mean, damn girl, just move out of your mom's house. Longtime followers will know that it also gets bonus points for me for being under 2 hours, and it's also just a boon for originality. Definitely recommend to horror fans, but it's probably not for everyone. Seeing the Sandman in space with a giant spider in the trailer, I expected a tense thriller, maybe with some horror. If you thought the same, take a deep breath, because this is actually a drama about isolation, as Sandler's astronaut is both physically separated from everyone on Earth, but more importantly, he's emotionally isolated from his estranged pregnant wife. Spaceman, much like Interstellar, focuses on the emotional weight of missing out on time with loved ones, and also has some third act craziness that may or may not change how you feel about it overall. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind also seems to have some influence as we see memories of different stages of Jacob and Lenka's relationship down to the multiple hair colors. Lenka, played by Carey Mulligan, bounces between sad potential widow to quirky girlfriend to scorned lover, but never quite gets that gut-punching moment to shine. Two very good performances, but overall the film felt somewhat derivative and almost as weightless as its zero-gravity camera. Also, you can't go wrong with Paul Dano as a human-sized telepathic spider.
Yeah.
Who would have thought a movie about corporate mergers, outdated cell phones, and a bunch of tech nerds would actually have me laughing out loud? I almost want to watch it again, but spoilers, it also has a somewhat tragic ending. I mean, they're painted as narcissistic and greedy douches, so it's not that depressing to see them kind of lose, but also Jay Baruchel and Glenn Howerton are lovable douchebags, so you know, they got me. I might have felt a tinge of sadness for these wannabe entrepreneurs. The film sets up a ticking clock right from the get as the BlackBerry nerds compete to become the biggest pocket phone and sustains that tension of an arms race throughout. Jay Baruchel is clearly as fantastic a dramatic actor as he is comedic, and Always Sunny in Philadelphia's Glenn Howerton gives him a run for his money as that guy that's always so serious and pissed, it's hilarious. I haven't seen all those Steve Jobs movies about Apple, but I assume this is like that, except funnier. Highly recommend. Just like BlackBerry, this is an unexpectedly entertaining movie about not just another decades-old piece of technology, in this case the Tetris video game, but also the bureaucratic red tape behind its creation. Tetris takes an interesting approach since the game was created in Russia during the decline of the Soviet Union by becoming a quirky spy thriller. It's tongue-in-cheek, and Taron Egerton has clearly become a super reliable leading man, from Eddie and the Eagle to Rocket Man. He clearly had the right idea for the slightly comedic, high-stakes tone of this movie. This is probably as good as a movie about a video game where you move falling shapes can be, but I didn't love it as much as BlackBerry. When most of the supporting cast are doing a typical robotic Russian archetype, there's only so many witticisms Egerton's character can throw before it's like watching him talking to a brick wall. Most people probably won't get much out of this somewhat forgettable cash grab of recognizable IP. Julio Torres, co-creator of Los Spookies, wrote and directed this uniquely quirky and surreal indie comedy about the struggles of trying to survive in the ultra-capitalist country, the United States, especially as someone born in El Salvador. The imagery and set design were really cool and thought-provoking, and it kind of reminded me of Sorry to Bother You, although it doesn't horse around as much at the end. Problemista is a sharp satire that points out the paradoxes and Sisyphean task it is to become a citizen and achieve your dreams here in the States. Maybe once upon a time the American dream was realistic, but in modern day, it's all but a fairy tale. Tilda Swinton is great, she's Tilda Swinton, but the film felt like a first-time director at points, becoming a little meandering. As a somewhat light watch, I'd recommend it to any fans of A24 movies and smaller, dry comedies. Would watch again, and will definitely keep an eye on future Julio Torres projects. Starring Sydney Sweeney as a virgin nun, I'll pause for laughter. Immaculate is a pretty standard horror movie that never really finds salvation. Call me a hater, but I just don't think Sydney Sweeney is that great of an actor. Right now. When she's going all out, screaming, crying, and doing more physical acting, it's great, and I'm sucked into the performance. When she's delivering conversational dialogue, it's giving high school Valley Girl vocal fry. Stiff, but trying to be sultry and timid at the same time, I don't know. The movie itself is a somewhat by-the-numbers story about demonic possession, a la Rosemary's Baby or The Omen, and didn't really do much for me personally. Some jump scares and gore, it gets the job done. By far the best part of the movie is the score by composer Will Bates. Definitely check out his work on Spotify. Now this is how you do an original take on a horror movie. Immaculate. Starring David Dastmalchian as Jack Delroy, a kind of trashier competitor to Ed Sullivan who experiences the worst night in live television history. Now, when I say horror, this is more like horror comedy because it has zero jump scares and the performances are all tongue-in-cheek to an almost SNL level of character work. Everyone is just a little over the top and basically a stereotype from possessed creepy child to unreliable psychics and skeptics. This is a love letter to those types of movies and TV shows of the 70s era. It doesn't even necessarily subvert expectations, but it has so much style and flair in the filmmaking that I just don't care if the concept wasn't exactly new. This is one Blu-ray I can't wait to buy, and side note, buy physical media, because not only are streamers becoming more unreliable and expensive, the quality is better on disc, and it's another revenue source for everyone involved in movies, which in turn gives us better movies. Studios take more chances on smaller original movies like this in theaters when they're able to make money back on physical media sales instead of depending solely on billion-dollar blockbusters. Plain and simple, streaming movies is like fast food. Sure, it's quick and convenient, but in the long run, less quality and more expensive.
Thanks for watching.